Hey everybody, Seth and Brian here from Go to Market Advisors, starting a new series on our new methodology Trap that we just released that is specifically for frontline managers. No, it's not a sales methodology. No, it's not a forecasting framework. It's meant to empower managers to get ahead of risk in their pipeline and to think like a manager, not like a rep. So that's the purpose of this series. We're going to break down kind of each component of it in small detail and make sure that you are empowered to go do this yourself. The whole goal of this series is to educate you on why you should be looking at this and how to do it, and then giving you a simple way to go tangibly do that day to day. So that's the focus for this series. Ryan, you want to break down what we're going to talk about in this specific video?
Yeah, so as you may have seen if you've watched any of the other pieces, TRAP is an acronym, and each letter stands for a different category of data points. So today we're going to be talking about the T, which stands for timeline, and more specifically within the timeline category, one of the four data points that we think is important, which is time and stage. So we're
Yeah.
going to walk through over the next couple of minutes is, as a manager, how do you look at time and stage as a data point that you inspect on each and every deal to give you an indication of where you're on track or off track. And as you've heard the terminology, what risk that may expose you and your rep and that deal to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's jump into it. I think everybody's probably heard time and stage at this point, but we'll break down specifically what we're referencing. So, to get time and stage, you first have to understand what your sales process is. Now, the duration of time to measure that can be a couple different ways. Simply, most people kind of measure that based on when we start the cycle to when it's close one. Typically speaking, you should do that based on historicals and showing what is our average time for a sales cycle that we're winning. It shouldn't be what you're losing. You should break that down to show what you're winning. So let's take an example and say our sales process, we did some historical analysis and found out our sales process is basically 90 days. Now, that's a wild assumption, and that could change depending on the type of sale you have, but let's say it's 90 days for the sake of this. Well, if your sales cycle is 90 days, you then need to also look at how many stages you have in the sales process. So we're going to use an example of saying this is a 5-stage process from disco to close one. Close one, you're not going to analyze because you've already won the deal. So in reality, we have 4 stages we should look at within a 90-day sales cycle to try to figure out what is the ideal time and stage. Before I talk about this example, the caveat to this is ideally you should have specific measurements for each time and stage, right? From the time to disco to demo, that likely should be a little bit quicker. And then the times from, let's call it demo to proposal stage, should be a little bit longer because there's more conversations that typically happen within there. But let's say that all things are equal and we're just going to do a simple baseline. If you have a 90-day sales cycle, your time and stage, excluding close one as a stage, you should roughly be about 22 days in stage. So, Ryan, break that down a little bit further. If I'm a new manager and I've never understood time and stage, somebody's explained that to me. What should I really be thinking about simply just before we jump into an example?
Yeah, I think time and stage, back to Seth's point, yes, it should be specific to your business. And so it may not be equal. This is kind of a cheat sheet on kind of like a Cliff Notes version to
Yeah.
get there quicker. If you have a RevOps team, they can probably give you more accurate numbers and you should use those instead. But in this simple example of 22 days, the idea is that should represent to you how long it takes to kind of check those key milestones in the buyer journey that you're walking through with your prospect. And so when you look at it through the manager lens, what you want to be thinking about is kind of the cadence that this thing should be moving at. It's never going to be identical. One might be 21 days, one will be 23. That's all fine. But if it's wildly apart, that should be cause for concern. And that's kind of the point we're talking about. So think of it as a kind of a drumbeat milestone that I should be progressing sort of in this way. And I think
Yeah.
you probably intuitively feel that. I'm working with a deal. We had a meeting, we had a phone call, had a demo, and then, ooh, it's been a while since we've talked to them. Those are the things that this is an objective data point that probably validates your gut, where you're like, boy, it kind of feels like we're stalled a bit. This is the way to look at that.
In my opinion, is probably the most critical objective data point. if you are in stage for 75 days and you have a 90-day sales cycle, the chances of you winning that deal are probably pretty low. Let's be honest. So I think let's break out an example here though. I'm a manager. I'm inspecting a deal. I got a rep who's at a demo stage, and I'm looking at how long my rep, not the total time of the deal, but just the time that the rep has been in the demo stage. And I noticed they've been in stage for 36 days, and our average time in stage is 22 days. What does that tell you? That tells you something is going on. Now, if we're taking a prime example of this, something that's been in demo stage that's now dragging on and we can't get a next step in particular scheduled, leads me to believe that they were just looking to take a look at the product, but they weren't actually evaluating. Again, that's a hypothetical example, but another way you can kind of visually look at this is if we take building blocks, right? And each building block is 22 days. When you start to look at it visually, you start going, oh, that doesn't look right. And that's what you should be as a manager when you're starting to inspect deals and starting to see this is now your baseline for what we call red light or green light. So red light is if something is starting to progress past that timeline. Now, 24 days, I would say is like an orange, yellow light, like shouldn't be the end of the world as long as you're seeing it. But if it's 36 days, to me, that's a red light. That's going, this is almost double the time it's supposed to be in here. What's going on? I'm going to put a remediation plan, or, maybe we need to get rid of this deal. And this isn't really a real opportunity for us.
Yeah. So I think to add to that, the purpose of this is, again, it's to give you kind of that hopefully early warning signs, not so late as this, but when it got to 25 days, that's where kind of the spider sense should turn off. It's a red light. We need to look at this. 36, the train's kind of left the station. This is now fully stalled, right? But the purpose is now, as a manager, your job is to go inspect. Now, in this circumstance, that doesn't mean the deal is dead. Maybe it was over like the Christmas holiday, or maybe it was over like they had a board meeting. There may be a legitimate reason where it's stalled, or they went through some strategic thing at their company and they had to sideline things for a month. Those all things happen, but you need to make sure that there is something like that. Because if you inspect it and nothing like that's happened, there's been no communication, that there's some anomaly in the process that would cause this delay, it likely means that in this example, because it's in a demo, the demo didn't hit, they were never seriously evaluating, or they didn't walk away compelled from the demo and they're going a different direction, all of which is risk. And so you've got to then have a conversation with your rep to say, I think we might have a problem here. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. And time and stage affects a lot of the other components that we look at in Trap as well, from close date to overall sales cycle. Those are really critical components to look at to say, okay, my rep thinks that just because this stage is elongated, that all of a sudden we're going to do the final 2 stages of proposal and trade in X amount of time. When in reality, one, we know that not to be true. It's like, you're not going to condense down somebody's buying cycle. It's not possible, in my opinion. And what normally happens is when you start to see these, what's called red light examples, you're going to lose the deal. But as a good risk manager, as what we want managers to turn into, you're going to start to get ahead of that, either to close loss it and not waste your time, or to potentially remediate a situation that, might be actually tenable down the road. But your job is to objectively look at the risk, not to just trust intuition of people, or to say that, well, this person said they're going to get back to me. You're going to waste time as a manager having those conversations without these objective data points to say, hey, Ryan, this deal's been in demo stage for almost 40 days now. We haven't scheduled anything. This deal's dead. Let's move on.
Yeah, one of the key things is, so this is just one of the 16 data points that we suggest is a good starting point for the framework. If this is the only red flag, that's different than if this is one of 10 or 6 or something, right? So the idea is, this is one point to say, okay, that's not in a good spot, but we're engaged with executives, but we've got a use case, we've got proven before, all these other things. If you've got a bunch of green lights, this is the only red, maybe there's just a small delay. But if this is one of many problems, that's where your segmentation of risk translates into your probability of winning from your perspective, and also translates into what you communicate upstream in a forecast.
Yeah, exactly. So just in closing of this is one, to Ryan's point, 16 data points that you can look at within Trap. We both believe this is kind of one of the more critical ones. And it's one of the ones that if you take your emotions out of it, and as a manager, you need to take your emotions out of it, you can objectively look at a data point and go, ooh, this doesn't feel right. Use that. Use the emotionless decisions of looking at building blocks and going, yep, got it. I don't think we're in the right place here. We either got to do something to get this in the right place, or this isn't an opportunity. This will save you a ton of time, and this will help you to be more accurate in forecasting, to Ryan's point, so that you're not committing stuff that has a bunch of risks in it that are clearly there, but your rep is telling you otherwise. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, this will be the first of many videos around equipping you to do this. Again, just to close on this piece, your RevOps manager should be able to easily do this for you, or you can do it yourself. This is something you should probably start to learn as a manager. As the further you get up in the business, you're going to start modeling off of some of this data. So it's really critical that you start to understand it. But hopefully this is helpful. Stay tuned for some upcoming videos on the trap methodology. Cheers.